A few years ago, my family came out to California for Thanksgiving. And because we are Midwesterners, that naturally meant an industrial quantity of deviled eggs. And before we go any further, a brief public service announcement. Eggshells do not belong in a garbage disposal. This was knowledge possessed by some, but apparently not all, members of my family, which is how I ended up needing an emergency plumber. So the plumber is going in and out through the backyard while I'm trying to work from my home office. And suddenly I realize that my daughter's cat is nowhere to be found. And this cat is not exactly an elite escape artist. She is a lovable orange chonk whose biggest daily ambition is finding the warmest patch of sunlight in the house. So I start checking all of her usual hiding places. But she is gone. Completely gone. And within minutes, my brain has fully committed to a storyline. The cat escaped. A coyote has definitely gotten her. I am mentally designing lost cat posters. I'm trying to figure out how I am going to explain to my daughter that we somehow lost her beloved polydactyl orange goblin during a plumbing emergency involving Thanksgiving deviled eggs. I'm spiraling. And then I walk into the living room and notice two tiny orange paws sticking out from underneath the television. She was standing on the TV stand, hidden behind the TV, quietly staring out the window, completely unbothered. Meanwhile, I had climbed the entire ladder of inference in under 5 seconds and arrived at an emotional catastrophe with absolutely insufficient evidence. Welcome to the Unknown Knowns, where intuition meets tradecraft. I'm Dr. Angela Lewis, and this is a space for people who think for a living. Intelligence professionals, leaders, and decision makers navigating complexity, uncertainty, and imperfect information in a fast-paced world. Each week, we explore how intuition, bias, and judgment shape the way we make sense of complexity and how to get better at it. Today's episode is about Bloom's taxonomy, the ladder of inference, and what both frameworks reveal about how intelligence professionals help people move from information to judgment to action. Bloom's taxonomy was initially developed in 1956 by educational psychologist Benjamin Bloom as a way to classify levels of learning. The idea was simple but powerful. Not all thinking is created equal. There are different levels of understanding, and they build on each other. Bloom's taxonomy was revised in 2001, renaming and reordering some of the levels, but the core conceptualization was the same. It focused on the scaffolding for developing critical thinking and problem-solving abilities. Bloom actually addressed two separate domains for learning: the cognitive domain, which is knowledge-based, and the affective domain, which is more emotion-based, since learning and develop encompasses both. There's also a psychomotor or action-based domain that was further developed by another educator. But here I'm going to focus on the cognitive domain. So Bloom's taxonomy was designed as a sort of pyramid, not unlike Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the base, you have remembering, just recalling facts, terms, or basic concepts, listing, defining, or naming. The next level up is understanding, being able to explain what those ideas or concepts mean. Think summarizing, classifying, or interpreting. From there, we move up to applying, using that information in new situations or real-world contexts. Think implementing, solving, or using that information for a purpose. Analyzing is the next level, breaking things apart and understanding relationships, drawing connections among ideas, differentiating, organizing, and comparing. Evaluating is the penultimate level, making judgments and being able to justify decisions. Think critiquing, judging, and supporting. And at the top level, creating, producing new or original work, building something new from that understanding. Think building or designing, constructing. And here's the key insight. Learning isn't binary, it's progressive. You don't jump straight to insight, you build toward it. You have to start with the basic scaffolding of understanding facts before being able to move up towards analyzing and onward to creating. Any Intel professional who has had experience at switching to a new region or topic understands this somewhat intuitively. You have to get up to speed yesterday, so you triage what basic knowledge you need, and you start building knowledge quickly. This is what intelligence can do for a leader making strategic decisions as well. If you think about it, the process of producing an intelligence assessment and ultimately making a decision based upon that assessment follows the same structure, whether we realize it or not. At the lowest level, we're just reporting. Here's what's happening. Facts, updates, signals. That's the remember level. It's necessary data, but it's not contextualized. And there's very little of the so what factor embedded. It's generally not sufficient for making a strategic decision. Then we move into understanding, adding the all-important context, explaining what's happening and why. And this is where a lot of intelligence products actually stop. They're accurate and they're well written, and they're still not quite as useful as they could be. Usefulness increases as we move up the taxonomy. The next level up is application. Leaders need to know what this means for the organization, for your operations, your people, your timeline, your decisions. This is where intelligence starts to differentiate itself from information. Then analysis. Identifying patterns, relationships, drivers. This is where we're really starting to reduce or better understand uncertainty. We're not just describing the world. Then comes evaluation, making a judgment. What's most likely? What matters most? What should you be paying attention to? This is where a lot of analysts hesitate, but it's also where intelligence becomes decision relevant. And at the top, creation. This is where we're not just explaining the world, we're helping to shape what happens next. Scenarios, options, indicators, decision pathways. This is what intelligence looks like as a decision support function. The real value of intelligence lives at the top of that taxonomy. It's not just the facts or the data points. A lot of organizations aim to be intel-driven, but their default posture is to rely on dashboards, which lack the contextualization, analysis, critical evaluation, and true decision support. It's not even in just explanation. The value is in going beyond the data and even the explanations. It's in the judgments and the ability to translate those judgments into something a decision maker can actually use. Another framework that helps explain this process comes from organizational theorist Chris Argyris and colleagues like Peter Senge, who popularized a model called the ladder of inference. The basic idea is that human beings don't experience reality objectively. We move from observable data to selecting certain information, to assigning meaning, to making assumptions, to drawing conclusions, to forming beliefs, and then ultimately to taking action. Each of these elements is a rung as you move further and further up the ladder of inference. But importantly, it's also a reflexive loop, meaning that our beliefs tend to affect what data we select the next time. In my case, the observable data was the plumber left the back door open, the cat was not immediately visible nor in any of her usual haunts, and my brain apparently said, well, obviously this ends with a coyote-involved tragedy and emotionally devastating conversations with my daughter. This is clearly how my daughter's villain origin story begins. And the important part is that this process usually happens fast, often unconsciously, which means intelligence professionals aren't just delivering information, we're intervening in how people build meaning from information. And that's where knowing your consumer becomes critical, because this is where Bloom's taxonomy and the ladder of inference start to intersect in a really important way for intelligence work. Because leaders are already climbing their own ladders of inference every day. They're absorbing fragments of information, filtering them through experience, assumptions, organizational pressures, prior beliefs, and time constraints, and then making decisions from there. If intelligence only delivers raw information, the consumer is left to build that ladder alone. But Argyris argues that instead of jumping to conclusions, it's best to analyze the assumptions and meanings and test the selected data and observations that help to create them, which is exactly what higher-level intelligence products, analysis, evaluation, scenarios, indicators, decision pathways do. They help slow that process down. They help leaders examine assumptions, consider alternatives, and move from reactive interpretation toward more deliberate judgment. In that sense, intelligence isn't just informing decisions, it's helping leaders to shape that cognitive process behind how decisions get made. Spouting facts is easy. Anyone can do that. AI can do that. A dashboard can do that. But contextualizing information in a way that actually lands so that someone can make a better decision under pressure with limited time and competing priorities, that requires understanding how they absorb information most effectively, what they care about, and what they're going to do with what you give them. So this isn't just about, quote unquote, educating the consumer in the sense that they don't know enough. It's about structuring information so that it becomes useful in their context. Because the same piece of intelligence delivered to two different consumers may not look the same. If it does, it likely hasn't climbed high enough on Bloom's taxonomy. The analyst role isn't to be the smartest person in the room, it's to be the person who can take complexity and sequence it so that someone else can act on it. Because intelligence at its best doesn't just deliver information. It helps people think more clearly under conditions of uncertainty. It helps them move beyond raw data and reactive assumptions toward more deliberate judgment. That's really what Bloom's taxonomy and the ladder of inference are both pointing toward in different ways: how human beings build understanding, assign meaning, and ultimately decide to act. So, if you're thinking about how to improve your intelligence products, here's a simple diagnostic. Are you informing? Are you explaining? Or are you actually helping someone slow down, question assumptions, and to make a better decision? Because sometimes the difference between panic and good judgment is simply slowing down long enough to notice the tiny orange paws sticking out from behind the television. Thanks for listening to The Unknown Knowns. If this episode made you think or rethink, share it with a colleague or friend who's ready to level up their intelligence tradecraft. Subscribe for more short, sharp conversations about the art and science of professional judgment. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and keep turning intelligence into impact.